Saturday Night Live is one of the longest-running comedy shows on television, and it is currently in its 50th season on NBC. Whether you're a fan of the show in its current state or not, it's undeniable that SNL has built a remarkable comedy dynasty over the last several decades while helping a plethora of great comedians and actors get their big breaks, such as Eddie Murphy, Adam Sandler, Will Ferrell, Andy Samberg, Bill Hader, and of course, our beloved chunk of coal, Norm Macdonald. These are just a few names out of the many stars that came from Saturday Night Live. But being a cast member on the show has not been an equally positive experience for everybody. Some of you may think SNL is unfunny right now, but Saturday Night Live without a doubt has had many lackluster seasons that have stained the show's legacy and made NBC producers consider canceling the show as a whole. In fact, there was one season in the show's history that was so bad that showrunner Lorne Michaels basically did everything short of getting on his hands and knees to beg the producers at NBC to not cancel the show and to give him another chance. But how did we even get here? Today we're going to talk all about season 11 of Saturday Night Live and what it was that made it a certified stinker for late night comedy fans everywhere. To begin with, Lorne Michaels would return the season as the showrunner because over the last 5 years, from seasons 6 through 10, he was absent from the show. During those seasons, the showrunner was Gene Domanian for one season only, and then the preceding 4 seasons were run by Duncan Dick Ebersol, who was the co-creator of Saturday Night Live, alongside Lorne Michaels back in 1975. Lorne's 5-year absence was because he was unable to reach a new contract with NBC executives, but this didn't last long because Gene and Dick's efforts had not resulted in any significant improvements in regards to network ratings and fan reception. So instead of canceling the show outright, NBC executives negotiated a deal to see Lorne's return as the showrunner. Lorne's first order of business when he returned to Saturday Night Live was to get a fresh start and pick a whole new set of cast members. This was an odd move by Michaels because historically they would have at least a few cast members from the previous season remain on the show to help guide some of the newer faces through their first season on SNL. However, Lorne decided to pull the plug on all the previous cast members from season 10 in 1984. This would be the second time in the show's history that an entire cast would be axed off to be replaced with a completely new cast, the only other time being season 6 in 1980. The cast would consist of a wide array of cinematic and comedic talent with the likes of Joan Cusack, Robert Downey Jr., Nora Dunn, Anthony Michael Hall, John Lovitz, Dennis Miller, Randy Quaid, Terry Sweeney, Denitra Vance, and Damon Wayans. Anthony Michael Hall was 17 years old when he joined, which made him the youngest SNL cast member to date, and he and Robert Downey Jr. had both just starred in the movie Weird Science earlier in 1985. Anthony also appeared in the movie National Lampoon's Vacations, which also starred fellow cast member Randy Quaid. Terry Sweeney wrote on Saturday Night Live during season 6 in 1980. Although the cast was a highly talented group, the lack of cohesiveness amongst each other would prove to be problematic as the season unfolded. While the cast was full of entirely new faces, the writers' room would make some significant changes also. Lorne would bring back writers Herbert Sargent and Jim Downey from season 10, with Jim listed as the head writer for season 11. The rest of the writers' room included Don Novello, Alan Whitney Brown, Carol Leifer, Jack Handy, and George Meyer. Lorne would also bring back former writers Al Franken and Tom Davis, but this season he would move them to the team of producers. Anyway, with a brand new team, Lorne Michaels was ready to attempt the nearly impossible feat of saving Saturday Night Live from the chopping block after a disastrous couple years of unanimously terrible ratings. The first episode of season 11 would air with the host being Madonna and the musical guest being Simple Talents. This first episode would be scorched in the ratings and lead to a lot of negative press for NBC. Some people even went as far as to say that Lorne simply didn't have it anymore. As the season continued, the problems would start to pile sky high on Lorne Michaels' desk. One of the biggest criticisms the show received was the poor execution by certain cast members of funny live sketch comedy, which is a trademark of SNL. Robert Downey Jr., for example, had a lot of trouble making the adjustment to live sketches given the fact that he had expressed that he was highly uncomfortable with sketch comedy and that he wasn't itching to do impressions of anybody given his background being in traditional filmmaking and cinema.
Do you have to do impressions as well?
No, I've never done impressions. I have some respect for people who do them. It's a skill, I guess, if you want to develop that skill. You see how we have contempt for things that are out of our reach? I guess I'm not a really good impressionist.
So they all suck.
No, I learned so much in that year about what I wasn't. I was not somebody who was going to come up with a catchphrase. I was not somebody who was going to do impressions. I was somebody who was very ill-suited for rapid fire sketch comedy. I was not of that ilk of the groundlings or anything. I'd never been part of any improv group. So I was kind of like, wow, this seems really hard and like a lot of work.
Given sketch comedy being a pillar of SNL, it's a mystery how Lorne saw Robert Downey Jr. as a formidable addition to the cast of the show. This isn't to say Robert Downey Jr. is untalented by any means, just that his acting skill set did not transfer to the big screen at NBC, and to this I'd be willing to bet that Robert Downey Jr. would agree that sketch comedy is not his forte. Unfortunately for Robert, some people consider him to be one of, if not, the worst SNL cast member of all time. Notable sketches featuring Robert Downey Jr. were Suitcase Boy, Mellencamp, and actors on film Steven Spielberg. Suitcase Boy is a pretty rough sketch to watch, and it's glaringly apparent that Robert is completely out of his element here. However, the Mellencamp sketch and the actors on film sketch were much more enjoyable to watch. It seems like even though this was out of his comfort zone, he eventually found a much better groove on the show about halfway through the season. I know I harped on Robert's performance, but the same could be said about Randy Quaid, Joan Cusack, and Anthony Michael Hall. Even though all of them had acting experience in films, it just did not come across that way in the sketches on the show. A lot of the sketches just didn't hit with the audiences at home, as it was obvious that the lack of glue amongst cast members had them entirely relying on talent alone to make the show serviceable. It did not work out super well, unfortunately. However, there were still occasional highlights of season 11 on SNL. For example, one of the best decisions they made was having comedian Dennis Miller on Weekend Update, which was an excellent use of his comedic ability and timing. Dennis seldomly appeared in the show's sketches, but he made memorable appearances on Weekend Update, which ended up becoming a golden moment on an incredibly rocky season. Some people credit Dennis Miller with reviving the format after Lorne Michaels' return and making it a whole new series. Entertainment Weekly actually voted him 4th out of 13, which is a pretty splendid ranking, all things considered. Aside from Colin Jost and Michael Che, who are the modern-day I meant to say the modern-day Weekend Update guys.
Comedian is the modern-day philosopher, which, first of all, it always makes me feel sad for the actual modern-day philosophers.
Dennis had the second longest run of Weekend Update with 6 long years behind the desk. Dennis Miller's performance behind the desk was so memorable that the cast members from the next several seasons would often come on and do impressions of him, and a lot of them were really funny. Another highlight of season 11 was John Lovett's portrayal as Tommy Flanagan on the Liars sketch. This character would end up being so widely liked that John Lovitz would later do this impression on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson the same year he was on Saturday Night Live. People loved this neurotic, lying sociopath character that John played, and he would be only one of 3 cast members that were asked to return for season 12 in 1986. The only other cast members that would return were Nora Dunn and Dennis Miller. Additionally, writer Alan Whitney Brown would also be brought back for the next season. Lorne expected that the other talented cast members would have sketches of their own that people loved and wanted to see more of, but it simply wasn't happening. Not all of the cast members were fired at the end of the season, though. If you were really unlucky, Lorne fired you immediately after a sketch, which is what happened to comedian Damon Wayans. One of the biggest controversies from the season was when Dennis was fired for willfully disobeying orders from Lorne Michaels after just 7 episodes had aired. It's important to note that Damon did not handle the power structure between his creative control and what the show demanded of him very well. He would commonly have his ideas rejected by Lorne outright, and he was very limited in his roles, which did not allow him to showcase his unique talent. In Damon's defense, his talent was incredibly underutilized, but Lorne had a reason for why he did this. From 1980 to 1984, Eddie Murphy was on Saturday Night Live and was massively successful on the show, and to be honest, he was probably one of the few reasons people actually tuned in to watch during this period. It was basically the Eddie Murphy show. So when Lorne brought Damon Wayans on as a cast member, he was trying to limit his screen time because he did not want people to start comparing Damon to Eddie and accuse him of carrying the show. This This makes sense to me, but I really think this should have been the last thing on Lorne's mind, considering the fact that the show was so close to being clipped from television to begin with. What happened next was Damon Wayans would be playing a cop alongside fellow cast members in the sketch called Mr. Monopoly. He did not believe in the sketch and thought it sucked, so live on the air he would make his character have a flamboyantly gay voice. Before the sketch, him and Lorne had gone back and forth already several times about how he should play the character and what he should wear, so Damon just snapped and went off script, which sabotaged the sketch for everyone, and it looked like this.
You moved a lot of dope, but you got caught.
Yeah, you're going to jail for a long, long time.
I wouldn't be so sure about that. My lawyer's gonna be here any minute.
You're that guy from the game, Mr. Monopoly.
In the flesh.
If the Parker brothers could see you now, they puke. Why you ain't in jail, Mr. Oh, that's right, you're Mr. Monopoly.
Needless to say, Lorne was pissed and fired Damon Wayans on the spot, which resulted in the show being down a cast member during an already barbaric season. Damon Wayans actually talks about this in an interview on The Breakfast Club.
They don't know you started on SNL.
Yeah, got fired from SNL.
Is
That's
it
how
true
it
you,
started.
after 7 shows?
Yeah.
7? Just
Ye-
7?
Yeah.
You was
'Cause-
that bad?
No, I was that good. Eddie Murphy had just left, and so Lorne Michaels was trying to, he thought, protect me from being compared to Eddie Murphy. And I'm like, look, you give me the ball or let me go. Fire me from the team. So he wouldn't give me the ball, so I just switched characters during the live taping. I wanted to get fired. They had me in scenes with where I would just hold a spear, and I'm like, I'm not doing that. My mother's gonna watch this show. No lines, just holding a spear in a thong. I'm like, I can't do this, man. I said, y'all need to hire an extra for this. And so they told me, you're not a team player. I said, no, I'm just not a slave. So my my frustration and we just kept getting into it, me and Lorne Michaels. So the final straw was this sketch called Mr. Monopoly, where we was doing a spoof on Miami Vice. So we'd have dress rehearsal, and then we'd have the air show. So between dress and air, Lorne comes to me and goes, you look like a pimp in that suit. I want you to change it to a cop's uniform. And I just snapped because the sketch wasn't funny. I don't even know what I said. I did it out of anger. So it wasn't really funny. It was just like, this losing in mind.
Right.
So did people laugh?
No.
Oh. You think if people would have laughed, it'd have been different? Like you would have proved something to Lorne?
Yeah, but I did it with the wrong spirit. And he was right to let me go. He's right to fire me. He fired me on the spot.
Lorne Michaels admitted he went absolutely berserk, which was rare for him given Lorne typically carried himself with a cool and level-headed demeanor. Apparently, in the moment, Lorne was so spiteful and angry, he actually said to Damon, quote, you'll never work in this town again, end quote. Even though Lorne was furious, he would end up letting it go and inviting Damon Wayans back to host Saturday Night Live later on after he found success with his sketch show In Living Color. Damon said that Lorne has a sick side to him that loves the rebel, and he credits that for the reason Lorne had him back on the show 10 years later. This was just 7 episodes in, and even after Damon's dismissal, the ratings would continue to dip to the point where NBC executives and NBC president Brandon Tartikoff were set on ending Saturday Night Live once and for all. Precisely in April 1986, the show was actually canceled for a brief moment until Lorne Michaels made a personal plea to Tartikoff to keep the show on the air. And Lorne also received the support from NBC producer Bernie Brillstein. Bernie's cooperation with Lorne really spoke volumes given his cozy position at NBC, and this inevitably led to Brandon Tartikoff giving Saturday Night Live one final chance with season 12 in 1986. As mentioned earlier, Lorne would fire most of the cast aside from John Lovitz, Nora Dunn, and Dennis Miller. As the show moved into the 12th season, they actually had a meta sketch where they called the last season A Really Bad Dream, which seemed to work really well. With the amalgamation of Dennis Miller on Weekend Update, Nora and John's hit characters, and exciting new cast members like Dana Carvey, who could seemingly do an impression of just about anyone, critics and audiences grew increasingly more warm to Saturday Night Live in the 12th season. I could talk way more about the success from season 12 of SNL, but that probably warrants its own video. Anyway, by the end of season 12, NBC president Brandon Tartikoff was convinced the show would continue to be a slam dunk with Lorne in the driver's seat, and the rest is history. This was a brief breakdown of season 11, some of the glaring issues it had, the rare successes, and the cast members who were fired and why. Anyway, what do you guys think? Did you ever watch season 11 of SNL? Did you like it? Did you think the season was overhated or not hated enough? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Also, I have a whole video talking about a bunch of people who were fired from Saturday Night Live if that topic tickles your fancy. The audio audio is just a little bit too hot in the beginning, but I'd still recommend it if you want to learn more about Saturday Night Live and the people who've come and gone. As always, I want to thank you again for watching the video, leaving a thumbs up, and subscribing to the channel. That's all I got for you guys. I love you, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.